Yeah, well, my art is one of the gifts that the Lord gave me as a talent to work artwork, and I guess that's why I see myself as a narrative artist, because I try to tell a story in my artwork, and I can share that with people.
Tribal trails, they lead to life.
Hello, my name is Irene Savitsky, and today on Tribal Trails we have Ray and Ruth Keeley. Ray, would you like to tell us where we are today?
Okay, today is you're in the city of Warman, and this is the Warman Art Center. We've been established for about 6 years now, and this is where I have my 2 studios and a gallery here too.
Okay. Ruth, where did you come from? Were you always in Warman? Where were you born?
I was born in Surrey, BC, and grew up there till I was in my mid-teens, and then we moved to Calgary, and that's where I met Ray. So.
And I had read that you had grown up in the foothills in Alberta.
Yes, I was born in Calgary, and in Treaty 7 country. So we moved up into the foothills when I was really young, and we lived for a little while on the Sarcee Reserve, and then we moved to a quarter section next to the reserve. And so that's the country I grew up in, was in the Calgary and foothills area.
Can you tell me something about your family? What was their background like?
My mom and dad. My dad he was a lot older than me. He was born in 1903, so he was 50 years older than me. But when I was born, and he grew up he was in L'Orange for a lot of years, and that's where he met my mom, and they moved to Calgary area, and that's how I got established into Calgary.
Ruth, what about your family? Where did they come from?
They came from Surrey, in British Columbia, before moving to Calgary.
So Calgary was where you met.
Yes, I actually knew her mom and dad before I knew her. So we.
That's a good thing.
We used to have a young people's college and career group. They offered their house to have our Wednesday night kind of meetings there. So.
Can you tell me something about how you came to know the Lord? Or was it through your parents?
Actually, I came to know the Lord. I was probably around 12 years old, or 12, 13 years old, or something like that. And I was invited to a Bible camp in Olds, Alberta. Speaker there was evangelical message, and like a lot of people that experience the Lord, it sounded like he was just talking to me. And when he asked if he'd come up to the altar and accept the Lord, that's when I went up. I made a deal though. I said, if this guy in front of me goes, he was kind of like dressed in a biker outfit, and I thought, if he goes to accept the Lord, then I will go. And he walked up and accepted the Lord, so I said, I better go. And so I did, but I didn't have a lot of growth after that. I had to come back to the Lord at a later date. So.
And how did you get to know the Lord?
I was brought up in a Christian home, and I remember kneeling at my mom's knee and asking the Lord to be my Savior.
So you must have been quite young.
I was 6.
Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of heaven."
And so you've always attended church then?
Always, yeah.
So when you got together, you mentioned that a college and career. Did you attend the same church?
What? Well, yeah, You were in.
I wasn't
you
even
were
living in
yeah,
Calgary
she was in
then.
Saskatoon, and she had been in nurses training, but she had become ill, and her parents needed somebody to go and help her move back to Saskatoon. And I was in between jobs at the time, so I said, "Yeah, I can go and give you a hand." And that's how I first met Ruth. So, but and we became friends. So,
And how many years ago was that?
oh, just about 50 years now. Well, matter of fact, it was just over 50 years when we met. So,
So how has the Lord been a part of your relationship?
Certainly, he has always been the leader of our home. We made him Lord of our lives and Lord of our marriage right from the beginning.
Right. And when did you move out of Calgary to Warman?
it was a kind of a journey that the Lord had us on. We became close friends, and Ruth was sick in the hospital before we were married, and actually was in really poor health. And her mom phoned me and said, "You should go and visit Ruth because she's not doing very well right now." I prayed about that, and I started driving towards Calgary. And in fact, I told her today that I was debating about this because I really had come to love her already. So, and I came to the hospital and I saw her really sick in the hospital, and I know she's going to correct me, but I said, "You'd make somebody a good wife." And she said, "Is that a proposal?" I said, "Yeah, I guess so." And she was out of the hospital in like 3 days.
Inspiration to get better.
That's definitely true.
So did you live in Calgary after you got married, or?
We kind of hopped around a little bit, didn't we?
We lived in Calgary until after our second child was born, and then when she was about 18 months old or so, we moved to Caronport, Saskatchewan, to go to Bible school.
Oh. And did you both go to Bible school at the same time?
You got your BFA.
I took a few classes, when we were there together, but I had already graduated from there with a diploma. And so I didn't have to take very many classes to
You did a BRE.
to get my BRE.
Yeah.
Okay. And so how long did you live in Caronport?
4 years, wasn't it? Yeah. Briarcrest really helped me to understand how to study, I couldn't hardly put a sentence together. I think I wrote a whole essay in one sentence. Because it just went on, and I didn't know where to, I wasn't really good with English all, but, and I had to take tutoring to get better at things, and at the end I had to do a little mini thesis, and Ruth was in the hospital again at that time, and she told me that I'd done a great job and I had put it together very well. So I learned a lot while I was in Briarcrest, and I learned a lot from the Lord while I was in Briarcrest, and Ruth was healed while we were in Briarcrest. So the importance of married students at Bible school it was huge, and the faculty were just fabulous with us too, to help us direct our lives.
And so how is your walk with the Lord? He said in Caronport, his relationship with the Lord really grew. You had actually gone to Caronport earlier, you said, and got a diploma there. So what is your relationship with the Lord in that time in Caronport especially being sick?
Well, it was kind of up and down. I was a closet drinker at that time, and yet I wanted to walk with the Lord very desperately. I wanted to have that relationship with Him. So I never lost that desire or that faith, but it sometimes was very difficult to live within the...
I kind of peeked ahead and saw one of your books, and it said total restoration for yourself, and how much of that was the Lord.
That was all the Lord.
That's right.
That was absolutely a God thing.
So you are actually a counselor. When I was reading about that, when did you take your counseling to become a counselor?
Well, I went back to school when I was 58, and I graduated when I was 64. So that's 10 years ago now.
And your counseling, was that for what kind of counselor were you involved in?
Basically dealing with people with mental health issues or addictions. I had a real longing to work with Christians who are hurting and in difficulty like I was. And so that's who came to my office.
And that's very true, because as a Christian, it doesn't mean to say that we don't have the difficulties, but we have the Lord.
Yeah.
So how did the Lord fit into? You are so talented and gifted in many of the arts. How would you say the Lord influenced your decision to take that on?
Yeah, I guess if I look at that part of my life, I started as an artist very, very young. I can remember the first time I got compliments for my art I was only 4 years old, and I drew a shark on a little blackboard we got for Christmas, my sister and I. And then pretty soon my sister she's older than me, and she was doing horses, beautiful horses. So I'd draw a horse, and then I would put trees on its head because I wanted to make a deer. And pretty soon I improved that to become something more realistic, and I kept drawing on the edges of my paper when I was doing assignments, and I was always sketching. And so that became a really important part of my life, as far as, and I had so many mentors, so many people throughout my life. A grade 4 teacher that bought one of my first paintings, and it was kind of interesting because that lady, we actually saw her just before she passed away, and that painting was on the wall beside her that she'd bought when I was, just a young, maybe 10 years old or something like that. So I had got a lot of encouragement to do art, but there was a while art's funny thing. It's like you feel like it's never going to end, but it comes to a stop every once in a while. I like to say life gets in the way, and you have to get on with life, and the Lord wants to teach you lessons through that time. So going to Bible school, even at Bible school, I would do. People heard about me being an artist. I would do, backdrops for conferences and stuff like that, and use my talents that way.
Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ.
So you're really blessed by the Lord that you can do what He wants you to do in your art.
Yeah.
and at the same time minister to people.
Yes.
So tell me about your art. It's all around us. It's
Yeah, well, my art is, I guess that's one of the gifts that the Lord gave me as a talent to work artwork. And I guess that's why I see myself as a narrative artist, because I try to tell a story in my artwork. And I can share that with people. And when we're going through this, a gallery or a show or something, I can explain what's going on and what happened. My art is like my journal. Ruth loves keeping journals. Well, this is kind of my journal. This is what I do. I can tell you what happened at the times when things have been painted, where things have been hard in our family, or when things have been really good in our family, or in the world even. Like I was talking about that painting back there. It's called Crossing Paths. And the pandemic restrictions hit, and everybody was locked down. And now everybody had to pick a path. So when I think of that one, Crossing Paths, I can share that with people, and they'll say, yeah, no, those were really crazy times, right? So when we came out of that, I tell people, okay, well, it's time to be friends again. You know, whatever you choose, let's be friends again. Why make that something that keeps a relationship from growing? Right. You make your decisions, I make my decisions. So, and that's what I try to bring forward.
So, do I understand that you give art classes in the high school here?
Yeah, I did. There's a mural outside. It's I've like I mentioned before. I did a lot of work with reconciliation and treaty issues. We are all treaty people, that kind of stuff. Because of my, I'm a Woods Cree from a place called Sucker River, just north of La Ronge. But dealing with those issues, it's been a journey for me, because I have to live it, right? I am a treaty person. And I've learned what that means as far as reconciliation. Now, I mean, that is important. The most important thing is that my father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. I'm his son. It says that in the Bible, right? And I don't have to worry about those issues. It's all taken care of. But but here on earth, there's wrongs that need to be looked at. I find it interesting that they call it, this is the time of the reckoning for First Nation people. And yes, I agree that is, but if you know the Lord, that's taken care of. I know there's going to be people that would argue that, and I know that they do, and I understand their hurts. But if you know the Lord, you're taken care of. You know, it's not as big an issue. It's still important, though, as far as I'm concerned.
Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. Now then, we are ambassadors for Christ, as though God were pleading through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God.
And you are also very, very talented as an author. You have written 4 books. Mm-hmm. And tell me the inspiration behind writing these books.
I wrote about my journey through mental illness and addiction. And that was my reason for writing, is just put it down on paper. Over the years, I had kept so many journals, and I didn't like them when I began to heal, because they were did not have a lot of nice things to say about, even about my family. So I wanted to get rid of them. So but everything that I wanted to keep was in my book. So then I felt good at destroying the actual journals.
And you wrote one about your family.
Yes, my dad, when he was 13, he and his brothers and sisters came with his parents from Russia to Canada in the early 1900s, when a lot of people, like the Mennonite people, were leaving and coming to Canada, and that's when they came.
You also have a devotional book that
Yes.
you have put out called Hope in the Storm.
And that is based on personal experiences and that through my alcoholism and mental health issues.
You have certainly been blessed in writing the book. And I understand you have done all the covers for them.
That was one thing that I've been fortunate to do, is to be kind of like the illustrator of a lot of Ruth's books.
Right, as partners, you've been able to just lift each other up by that. When you have been able to take her stories and illustrate them on the book covers.
Yeah.
That was very unique that you have that. And do you attribute that to the strong relationship that you have with Jesus?
Well, her journey was my journey too. Because when she was committed to the mental health, and into care, and actually was warded of the government for 2 or 3 times. I was still there, and I wasn't going to give up on that. I mean, when we got married, it was for better, for worse, and riches and poor, until death do us part. And that's something I believe in.
Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her.
Ray and Ruth's marriage is a wonderful example of how we are supposed to live our lives in good times and in bad times. Stick together and love each other. Also to others, we should live a life of forgiveness, as Ray mentioned. Real reconciliation between men is only possible when we are reconciled with God, as it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20. So, if you want to know how you can get right with God, call us. We'd love to hear from you. Our spiritual helpline is 306-961-2588.